Greetings, YouTube. Tuning in for a little video I like to call Gurgling for Jesus. This is the all-Christian death metal video. So, before we get started talking about all that stuff, though, I wanted to give some shout-outs to a few people who have been subscribing to my channel and who mentioned me in one of their own videos. So first of all, big thanks to Rick from the Dreadful Minutes. He did a video maybe a little over a week ago now for that Roger Kjorvik contest, and he had to shout out 6 channels, and my channel was one of them. So and it was funny because he was saying like, oh, I'm shouting out people who aren't familiar with me. Well, I'm definitely familiar with Rick. A lot more people should be familiar with Rick. Like, he's a great YouTuber. He's a great guy. Just everything I've seen. I watch most of his videos. So, thank you, Rick. I really appreciate you mentioning my channel, and I'm a big fan of your channel as well. So, also, some other guys that have subscribed in the wake of that and whose channels I have started watching. No Solution, who's another guy that's doing a lot of really awesome videos. I'm really liking his channel a lot, so definitely go subscribe to No Solution. Also, Metal Marty Mac, also, who is an Irish fellow who has making some great videos. He just did a video that was about a video response about Ireland, the St. Patrick's Day video. So really cool. It was all death metal themed. So definitely go and subscribe to him. All right. Now, anyway, getting underway. Gurgling for Jesus. So here we go. I'll give you a little background here. So I've been into death metal for a long time. It's hard to, probably at this point, 30 years at this point, roughly about. I probably first heard, I think the first death metal record I heard was probably Cannibal Corpse, Tomb of the Mutilated. And I'll tell you the truth, when I first heard it at age 20, I wasn't into it. I thought it was fucking ridiculous, honestly, when I first heard it. But that was my first death metal record, honestly, in 1993 was the first thing I heard. So I was probably, for some people, I'm probably a little late to the party because death metal had already been going on probably in earnest for about 5 years at that point. A lot of it. I mean, not including, like Scream Bloody Gore, but I'm saying like by about 1988, you started to see other death metal records coming out. So I didn't really actually listen to death metal until Tomb of the Mutilated. Like I said, I wasn't sold on it, but I eventually came around to some other stuff. I was more of a punk rock kid. I was more into like, at that point I was more into like hardcore punk and stuff and thrash metal, all the classic metal stuff too, Sabbath, Sabbath, Priest, Maiden. So death metal took me a moment to break into death metal. But I certainly, now for the Christian themed death metal stuff, again, coming from more of like the background of, being into like Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, Slayer, the idea of Christian death metal to me was just, it was anathema. It was like, this is an abomination. This is a joke. That was kind of my feelings. I was like, this is rebellious music. Christianity is the mainstream. It is, especially at that point, you look at it like early 90s, that would be like, a lot of people's like grandparents' generations now, people that aren't with us anymore, the law of the land, everything was based off Christianity and stuff. So I was not interested in hearing that sort of stuff. So in the wake of kind of like seeing some other videos, like, the heavy metallurgy video about Christian metal and stuff, I decided to go and check out specifically, in the last few years, I've checked out a few Christian death metal bands. I've bought records by some Christian death metal bands and enjoyed them to varying degrees. So I figured I would do a video where, as somebody who's not a Christian, not religious at all, would kind of give my impressions on 4 Christian death metal bands. All of these bands are from the 90s. All of these bands are, old bands. Some well-known, some not well-known. So anyway, Here we go. We'll start with the most well-known, of course, which would be Mortification right here. This is the self-titled Mortification album. This is a recent reissue on Sound Mass on orange vinyl here. So, yeah, Mortification. I had heard Mortification before, but I had only really heard Mortification on comps, like Death is Just the Beginning, that kind of stuff. I never bothered to check out any Mortification full lengths until just here in the last couple months. So this first Mortification record, I'm going to take it out here. I'm going to take it out of the sleeve real quickly. We don't need to do that, but you'll see the back there. This record is, you can tell it's a very early death metal record. This was originally released in 1991, so pretty early on. Steve Rowe, which I believe is this fellow right here, is still in the band. Mortification is still going. He's the bassist and vocalist of this band. They are Australian, of course. They are an Australian band. There's 2 Australian bands in this, actually, which is kind of funny. I never would have thought that, like, Australia would be a huge Christian death metal hotbed, but apparently it was to some extent, at least in the 90s. Probably not so much anymore. But anyway, this record, it is a very good early death metal record. You know, you can tell it's coming from a thrash background. It has, you know, the guitars aren't super down-tuned. They're probably in, like, E-flat, I would say, which a lot of those early bands were. Cannibal Corpse played in E-flat on their early records, too. You know, and a lot of thrash bands played in E-flat. So it doesn't, guitar-wise, it doesn't sound super heavy, but the vocals are very guttural. And, you know, they are very much death metal vocals. Much more guttural than, let's say, like what Chuck Schuldiner was doing at, you know, around this time. So, very good. The songs that stood out to me on this, I would say Brutal Warfare, Journey of Reconciliation, actually, The Destroyer Beholds, all really good. And again, there's like, Steve's a really good bass player. There's some nice, you know, technical bass playing and stuff on this. Good vocals. You know, of course, Christian themed lyrics, but nothing that was super odious to my ears or super cheesy. So definitely really liked this album quite a bit. So the self-titled Mortification album, 1991. So, and then I'll show another Mortification record as well, the one that is probably their crowning achievement. Of course, this is the second Mortification album. This is Scrolls of the Megaleoth. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But yes, so this is the second Mortification album. This, again, this sees them kind of inching further into straight-up death metal territory. There's still some thrashiness to it. It's on yellow. This is also a recent, maybe kind of an orangey, piss-colored yellow reissue, also on Sound Mass. This one is from 2016, so this actually came out before, this vinyl reissue actually is before the self-titled. So, again, Steve Rowe right there. There's still a 3-piece at that point. The songs that really do it for me on this, that Lymphosarcoma I really like, Raise the Chalice, Eternal Lamentation, you know, I believe it's Death Requiem. Yeah, this sees them get a little more, they become more technical, like the guitar playing is more intricate, doesn't sound quite as thrash oriented, the riffs are a little more brutal, that kind of thing. A really good record also. So Mortification, I'm definitely sold on. I know they're still going and they've put out a lot of other stuff, and I don't know. I've seen some covers with really dorky artwork. There's one that has like this angel on it that's like, it looks kind of like Fabio. It's like a cartoon Fabio angel, and it's like super homoerotic, which is cool, but I just think it's funny that's it's a Christian band and it's a Christian album, so I don't know. Mortification, got to look into a little more, see if I like any of the later stuff. But anyway, next, another Australian band, and the other piece of vinyl, we've got Paramecium, Exhumed of the Earth. This is the 2020 Bombworks reissue. Bombworks is a label. They're based in Quincy, Illinois. They largely are known for releasing Christian metal, though I know in recent years they've also been reissuing CDs and stuff by it. Like they've been licensing stuff like Nevermore and things like that, and like Coroner, and doing like kind of like deluxe CD reissues of stuff that's going out of print from like some of the bigger labels like Century Media and Noise, you know, where they're like the labels aren't really doing it because they're not bands that are like active anymore, or not bands that really appeal to a younger crowd. So anyway, let's take this out. So Paramecium. Paramecium was actually something I learned about through the Nuclear War Now board. We'll open that up. You can see some photos of the guys. Paramecium they're a doom death band for sure. They're more on the slow, brutal kind of like grinding tip of death metal. The vinyl's pretty cool on this. I actually will. It's a double LP as well. So I'll show you what the vinyl looks like on this. Yeah, it's kind of a nice kind of green and white sort of like splatter there. Yeah, really cool. Cool vinyl. This I heard about on the Nuclear War Now board. For years, people were talking about Paramecium and how Paramecium was like a really underrated death metal band, and how it would be cool if somebody could reissue it, because of course it had been out of print forever, you know. So this is their first album. They did put out a bunch of other stuff after this. I have not listened to anything else but this. But this definitely can compete with the likes of early My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost and that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that was the influence of it on it. But of course, it just comes from a Christian religious like background belief system. So as far as the songs here, I'm gonna go the Killing I really like. The Voyage of the Severed as well. Those two in particular stand out, and it's really good. Really good production on this. I mean, as far as like the quality of this reissue is really nice. So definitely something worth checking out. Paramecium, really good doom death, Christian doom death from Australia. Originally released in 1994, I believe, when this came out. Alright, and that's it for vinyl, but for CDs, and I've got a few other CDs here. So this next band is a band I actually had never really heard of before and learned about from watching Dennis from Analog Archives. He did a video just about kind of like underrated death metal, and this is an American death metal band called Crimson Thorn. This is their very first album that is called Unearthed. This is also a reissue on Bombworks. This just came out 2019, came out a few years ago. So this album was originally released in 1995. I can't remember I think it was Retroactive Records, maybe. I'm not sure if that's the original label. So this has their first album as well as their demo, the Plagued demo as well. So this is, I mean, I'll comment on the demo first. So you can tell this band was a thrash band. This band came out of the thrash scene. Like the demo, the vocals are thrash. It sounds just like really well played thrash, you know. And I think the demo's from like 92, 93. So a little behind the times, because like you said, you know, by that early 90s, thrash in the underground was pretty much dead. You had some European bands still doing it, but in the US, thrash was warmed over. It was leftovers, you know. Death metal was tearing up the underground, and it was well in the grip. So 95, this comes out, and this definitely fits more into kind of like that obituary, Mortis Scold type of death metal. These guys were from Minneapolis. These guys are from Minnesota. Vocals are very guttural. I'll read you a little back here on what they said on this Metal Icon thing. It says, hailing from Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA, Crimson Thorn is one of the most technical and pummeling death metal bands ever. I would disagree. They're not one of the most technical. I mean, pummeling, sure, most pummeling, eh. They stand toe-to-toe with bands like Obituary, Carcass, and Cannibal Corpse. Crimson Thorn is one of the few Christian death metal bands that could ever be put in such an elite category. The vocals are low and ultra guttural. The album literally includes a liner note that no effects were used on the vocals. Yes, it does. From beginning to end, the blast beats, double bass assault, guttural growls, and general death metal fury never lets up. This release features the first full-length album from the underground death metal band. Fans can once again discover the delight and joy of the deep, distressing, and downright disturbing sounds of Crimson Thorn on this remastered gold CD edition. There's hyperbole there, obviously. Crimson Thorn are good. They're definitely good, but I mean, are they as good as Obituary, the best Cannibal Corpse, the best Carcass? I would say no. I would say they are solid. They, were definitely in 1995, were on par with a lot of death metal going on. The riffs are chunky, nice palm-muted heavy riffs and all that kind of stuff. Really good guttural vocals, of course, as mentioned. But songwriting-wise, there's not a ton that really stands out to me. I mean, maybe maybe it'd take more time to grow on me. It's hard to say, but I like it. It's good, but I don't think it's as good as the bands that they're trying to compare it to. So that's the first album by Crimson Thorn. I also bought, because again, this was another Bombworks reissue. This is the second Crimson Thorn album. This is Dissection. And again, this is 1998. So this is a little later in the game here. This is 3 years later. Again, it sounds a little more brutal, I would say, at this point. That's really the only difference. Things have become, because by the late 90s, death metal is a lot of death metal that's either bands are breaking up. A lot of the OG death metal bands are breaking up or putting out albums that aren't good. I'm thinking like Deicide putting out like Incinerate Him, and shortly thereafter In Torment and Hell, which are like their worst albums, I think. I mean, I think most would agree, and there's Obituary put out Back from the Dead, or whatever, that album, also one of their worst, So these guys are actually faring better than a lot of those bands, but they're not, also what was happening was you had a lot more, the whole brutal death metal thing, the early brutal death metal was happening there, with bands like freaking Skinless and Dehumanized and Pyrexia getting, Internal Bleeding, those bands getting a lot bigger, a lot of that whole, like, East Coast brutal death thing starting to happen, as well as, like, the ultra-fast technical stuff starting to happen, like that death metal getting all about being fast and totally overwhelming, So these guys still sound like an old school death metal band, but a little behind the times, I would say. But good stuff. There's some bonus tracks. They do a Living Sacrifice cover, which makes sense. Living Sacrifice were another Christian band. I think they started out as kind of more of like a death thrash, and then kind of turned into almost like a straight up thrash band, and then it kind of turned into a metalcore band, like a Christian metalcore band. But I remember I've heard one Living Sacrifice record a long time ago, but never really listened to much. They also, interesting enough, they cover Striper around here too, loud and clear. There's definitely more like obvious Christian lyrics that pop up on this. I remember listening. Oh yeah, I forgot. This comes with a little collector card. You gotta like that. It's like a little foil stamped collector card of the band. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Whoops. So anyway, Crimson Thorn. Good, but not amazing, in my opinion. Solid stuff. Alright, and then the last thing I checked out, and this is probably my least favorite thing, and I think I mentioned in my little preview for this band can hardly be called death metal. I think a lot of people thought I was going to mention Vengeance Rising. I still haven't checked out Vengeance Rising. I need to check out Vengeance Rising. But this is not Vengeance Rising. This is a band from Olathe, Kansas called Possession. And this is their complete discography. This was released in 2020 on Extreme Music. And this is called Disentombed Manifestations right there. Disentombed Manifestations. There you go. See if that focuses or not. Probably not. Anyway, yeah, Possession. So this has their one and only album, their 1995 album that's called Eternally Haunt. It has an EP they released in 97 called Scourge and Fire. Some unreleased stuff from 98. And then the second disc is all their earlier demos, like their 1993 EP, The Unnameable Suffering, their Mad, Crazed, and Violent 92-93 demo, and then an unreleased demo from 95. So, okay, anyway. Possession. So, Olathe, Kansas. These guys are honestly more of just a straight-up thrash band that happen to have some, some like death metal vocals. The vocalist even has some kind of more power metal-y type shrieks and things like that. The vocals are mostly higher. They're more high-pitched, kind of shrieky vocals. Some lower gutturals a little bit, but not so much. But really, this band is more of a technical thrash band with some leanings into death metal. Like I said, the vocals being harsh, but I don't know. I listened to disc 1 in its entirety and really wasn't feeling it very much. I was like, oh, this is kind of annoying. Like, mostly the vocalist just kind of bugged me. He's kind of all over the map, and he sings over everything. There's not a lot of... I don't tend to like bands where the vocalist doesn't allow breathing room in the song for the music to shine at times. This guy was kind of like just all over it, and a little too much for my liking. The Scourge and Fire MCD, kind of the same thing, and the 98 songs that were unreleased, kind of the same thing. I listened to the first few tracks on here, and like I said, as expected, it's way more thrash. It's very much thrash. And again, these guys, it kind of following in the vein of Crimson Thorn, kind of behind the times a little bit. They're putting this stuff out in the mid-90s, and there's like these guys feel like there's a real heavy thrash influence, and for a band in 95 that feels dated, Interestingly enough, like the vocalist and I think one of the guitarists in this band broke up in like 2000. They were a band for 9 years. They started in 91, ended in 2000, but the vocalist and one of the guitarists ended up starting, their next project was a unblack metal band, probably one of the more infamous ones, Frost Like Ashes, yeah, who recently, I think, reactivated. They've released like a couple new singles and stuff, so Frost Like Ashes, so like they went on from being this kind of like vaguely, like a slightly death-influenced thrash band to being one of the forebears of unblack Christian black metal stuff. So interesting stuff. So yeah, I wasn't really into this. I don't know if I'm even going to keep this. This is like one of those things where it's like, might end up getting in on the trade pile. So anyway, yeah, that is it. That's my journey into Christian death metal. I didn't really go too much into the lyrical themes. I read lyrics and stuff. I mostly tried to decipher see how much I could hear, because you're thinking of this from, let's say, I'm listening to this as somebody who's not Christian and not super interested in being preached to, and it's like how much Jesus stuff is creeping through underneath the metal. And for most of the stuff, not a lot. Like I said, Crimson Thorn was probably the one where I could hear the most, where it'd be like, there were some sound bites from like preachers and stuff, and you're like, okay, this is obviously a Christian band, but all right, that's all I got for you. In the comments below, if you would like to talk about, if you've heard any of this stuff and like to talk about it, or if you've got other recommendations for other Christian death metal stuff I should listen to, I would definitely be open to hearing it. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.